Hello and welcome to today's episode of Untold Chapters with Austin Macauley Publishers. Our guest today is Paul Dart, a former theatre designer who, after 25 years of designing sets, costumes and lighting for plays, operas and modern ballet, co-founded James Glancy Design. For the past 30 years, he has led the way in reinventing large-scale, bespoke seasonal decorations in England, delighting millions with his creative vision and bringing joy and wonder to audiences around the world. Thank you for agreeing to come onto an episode of Untold Chapters with us. Would you like to introduce yourself for our audience?
Of course. My name is Paul Dart, and I am the author of How to Do Christmas and ex-theatre and opera designer. And for the past 25 and 6 years, I have been head of design and co-founder of James Glancy Design, who do large-scale Christmas decorations around the world.
With your book, what inspired you to, write it and share your approach to just Christmas decorating?
Well, obviously, as a sort of professional designer, I have obviously been designing since I was, 10 years old. And that is when I made the decision to be a theatre designer. Obviously, when I went into this rather strange world of just doing Christmas, after I'd finished decorating, huge streets and enormous shopping centres, I would come home because most of that work finishes in sort of early November. And so I would have the rest of the month going up to Christmas with nothing to do. So I would drive my partner completely bonkers by completely decorating the house and the gardens and God knows what else every year as a sort of form of therapy. We had them photographed every year because obviously neighbours and work colleagues sort of thought they were absolutely wonderful. And to begin with, it was just a way of recording the lunacy that I go to decorate the house. And then someone suggested that other people might quite enjoy seeing this and get inspiration from it.
So when you used to, return and start decorating, did you used to wait until December, or did you sort of start to, you know?
Generally speaking, I try and do it bit by bit so that it doesn't feel like it's a chore. And so I fit it in amongst all of the other things because most people don't realize that designing this very large scale Christmas decorations commercially, it goes on all year. So really, December is the time when I'm talking to clients for the coming year. And so I'm also spending quite a lot of time thinking about Christmas, but not necessarily in the same way that you would think about your own front room. But my front room becomes, because it's much smaller scale, it remains personal, whereas obviously when you're dealing with a huge street, it's a different sort of design ethos.
Oh, fair. Like you say, with the fact that with your home it's more personal, is there sort of a different method when it comes to decorating more for work and then decorating personally?
When you're decorating your own home, it's much easier in one sort of way of looking at it, in the sense that you can get to most spaces in your own home, relatively easily. And also the story is quite different. What I would do at home is quite personal to me and experimenting with how I can change the house so that when guests arrive, they have this moment of sort of disbelief that the house has changed quite so much. Whereas I do the same in a street, but it's a completely different thing because, there are lots of rules and regulations, health and safety, and the reality of high winds and all sorts of other things, which people don't really take into consideration, nor do they realize quite how big these things are and also how expensive they are. For something that's in the public domain, it has to also, be legally safe. And there are lots of engineers and all those sorts of people that get involved at the planning stage to be able to sign these things off because people just assume decorations that are sort of can be up to 30 meters across just appear out of nowhere. And it actually takes very large teams of people, both on the ground and also in this design office, to make sure they are not only look good, gorgeous and fabulous, but also are safe and will stay up in any form of weather.
When you've been just decorating in general, what has been the most memorable Christmas decoration project, and what made it so special?
Obviously, the most memorable Christmas decorations that I'm known for is obviously Regent Street. And they are now the most Instagram decorations in the world. And they came about in a very odd way because I'd already designed for Regent Street a few seasons before we started on the spirits. And they were actually inspired by some sculptures that were in a light festival, which I wanted to use an icon that was connected to people. And to begin with, the scheme was only for Jermyn Street. It wasn't actually for Regent Street at all. The heraldic beast for the Crown, who own all of that those streets, is a pelican. And so, and often I will look for icons that haven't been used for a while. And so angels came up. And also they fitted Jermyn Street because it's mainly tailors. And so there was also the possibility of using sculpted metal that would look like fabric in the wind. And so there was a connection to all of these things. And there also happened to be a carving by an 18th century, a very famous 18th century carver in the church on in Jermyn Street in St James of this pelican. And so it was a sort of weird combination. And also the fact that the angels looked right to be flying through the sky. A lot of decorations, they sort of look illogical because they're just big frames with lots of lights on, but they don't actually have much of a storytelling sort of aspect to them. And the thing that I think has been most interesting with the public's reaction to them is the fact that they can join in with the imagination of what these angels, these spirits are, and that they're sort of non-religious. They're more of a modernist sculptural idea of how to fill this street with one of the few human icons that are connected to Christmas.
With someone perhaps tackling the task of decorating maybe their home for Christmas for like the first day, first time, or perhaps on a budget, do you have any advice for them?
Yes, I think the first thing is to look at your home and be practical. Where can you fix things? What do you already have there that makes decorating your space easier? That could be, pelmets, or it can be curtain rails, or it can be soft furnishings, or it can be banisters, or things that are already there that make the sort of practical side of decorating your home easier. The other thing to do is to look at your home and make the decision, is this a gold house or a silver house? Because houses have very particular atmospheres, and then decide what colour you would decide to be your theme for that particular year. And then really start from the front door or, the entranceway and tell a visual story of how you want to transform your living space, and then apply a personal story to that, because everybody's got a different taste and a different reason why they're celebrating this particular time of year.
So, how do you recommend choosing a color scheme or a theme for holiday decorations?
That I would recommend really to examine your own taste parameters. I, as a designer, have to be very flexible in that colours have a very particular atmosphere. And there are particular colours that are very traditional, inverted commas, at this time of year, but it doesn't mean to say you have to use them. And there is obviously a great sort of Christmas is a very robust tradition. and it can more or less take any sort of, mishandling. And that's really down to you, sort of what sort of space you live in, and also how far you want to go in experimenting with how you could possibly change it. Because that's actually the big secret and the big sort of joy that I think people remember from their childhood, and certainly I do, is that I can very clearly remember the first time my parents switched on the Christmas tree, and I was most probably 5 or 6, whatever it was. And I was immediately struck by the fact that they'd done this very weird thing of bringing a live tree into the front room and then covering it in this sort of, a set of pea lights, and then all of these heirloom decorations came out, and Mum was telling me stories where they'd come from. But the main thing that struck me was that one could change one's everyday environment to something fabulous, that you could change the everyday to something that's extraordinary. And I still feel that Christmas is the time when you can go mad. You can decide to have loads of pink, cushions and curtains, in the knowledge that you're going to take them down in the spring if you don't like them. Whereas most people are quite conservative in the way that they decorate. So this is the one time of year where maybe you can go a bit mad. Whereas I'm not really the sort of person that is what I refer to as a bucket of sea salt and 4 tapers sort of Christmas. I'm a more is more sort of person. And it is the time to be generous in all aspects, let's put it that way.
The time to try something new that perhaps you may not have done or tried before, even thought of before.
Yes, exactly.
The book discusses taste during the holidays. How do you balance tasteful decor with festive fun? And how do you
Oh,
define good taste for festive decor as well?
I personally don't think there's any such thing as good taste. Taste is a very difficult thing to discuss, because in the end it is down to each one of us to make that decision. And that's what puts the personality into any design project, is this exercise in taste. And again, repeating what I've said before of the fact that these decorations, they're ephemeral. They are going to come down and will be different next year. So for my money, I don't really cast aspersions. Yes, I will maybe look at certain things and go, well, that's not my taste. But on the other hand, I will also look at something that is very effusive and go, well, at least they've made the effort and they've tried. And so, people can get very sort of snooty about, those sort of houses that pile 2 tons of decorations on the front, and it looks like a sort of bring and buy sale from a sort of Christmas decorations company.
Mm.
But I prefer that to just one set of lights looking rather mournful in a tree, marooned in the middle of nowhere. So yes, I think I will always applaud people that make the effort. Let's put it that way.
And especially when it comes to, because one of my favorite things is right at the beginning of the month, just walking down the street just to see, what the decorations look like. If there's any new ones, and walk past a property, and what they've done is, like you say, they've gone the extra mile, and they've wrapped the tree that's on their front garden in Christmas lights, and it honestly just elevates it just that little bit further. And it could be minimalistic, it could be that step further, it could be whichever, and it's always very, very festive and very
Yeah,
fun to look at.
I think it's more when you see, a sort of house that's sort of just absolutely plastered in every color and everything's flashing on and off, and there's no overall
Mm.
control. I think there's always a middle ground of it's and also it has to be in context. If it's a period house, then it's less likely to be covered in sort of, candy canes and Santas, climbing up the chimney and all sorts of mad things. But on the other hand, Well, there are two sort of thoughts. I'm, a more is more, less is a bore sort of person. But I'm also in the thing of, Schiaparelli had a sort of rule: when you go out of an evening, you put all your jewelry on and then you take one piece off. And there are sometimes you can just look at something. You need to always stand back and look at what you're doing. And it's a matter of feeling it. If you feel it's gone too far, then take some bits off. If it hasn't gone far enough, put some more on. I don't really have any hard and fast rules because, these decorations have to fulfill first of all, you have to fulfill your own parameters, but also then you need to think about who is going to be seeing these things and why am I doing it? Obviously it would be a very different design theme if it was just for one's kids and, for, family, or if it was for friends and for a big party. There's a sort of difference of context.
Absolutely. But how can someone personalize their decorations to reflect perhaps like family traditions or unique styles in, when it comes to decorating in general?
I think that you then need to go into the world of making more things yourself. Obviously, the commercially available decorations are, by the dint of being commercial, generally sort of middle of the road. And really, everybody celebrates Christmas in quite a different way. If you look at the way it's celebrated across the world, it's quite distinct in different countries. And I think one should be doing the same with your own Christmas. I personally, love creating theatre in the house because it gives neighbours and friends and my sort of immediate tribe great joy to come and see the latest lunacy that I've got up to. But on the other hand, I would not expect other people to do it to such a degree that I do, because obviously I'm very lucky because I work in this area. And really, it could be as simple as, like with my parents, keeping old decorations from previous generations and remembering the stories and using the dressing of the tree as a way of telling the stories of one's past, grandparents and great-grandparents, of family, or of where the decorations came from travels abroad, or ones that have been made by the kids or friends or whatever. So there's lots of very simple ways of making something personal. And obviously by doing something that's a bit more distinctive also makes it personal, because then people will remember it.
Absolutely. I mean, I th I can't quite remember when I made it, but I think we've still got a one of those big stars that I made when I was in secondary school, I think. And it's like it's not really something that took that long, but we've had it ever since. So, that's a perhaps an idea for you.
Exactly.
What are what are your tips for making Christmas decorating more sustainable? Like perhaps, upcycling or perhaps reusing items. So like what you were saying before with perhaps using previous items that children or people had made before.
I think the whole eco side of Christmas can be is basically obviously using LED lights that consume less power. I think most probably the biggest rule of thumb is never throw anything away. I find that people, obviously when I have decorations that I have lasted 25, 30 years, and they've become my favorites because they fit with lots of different schemes. They've been reused, on a very regular basis. And I find that that's the best way of being green as far as the sort of usage of things. And also because if you're decorating on the scale that I am, you need a lot of stuff. And to buy new every year would not be sort of, yes, it's just not practical. but also because I enjoy still using the things that I've grown fond of.
Yeah, sort of like discovering an old friend, probably.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Are there any bold or perhaps unconventional item or ideas from your book which you'd encourage readers to perhaps try this year?
I would say that you need to look at the traditions of Christmas and find what materials are sort of pertinent to yourself. And I quite like using a lot of branches and sort of coppice wood and things that bring the outside inside, because that's one of the key themes with Christmas. Because obviously in pagan times, Christmas and the festivities that took place over the darkest time of year were about remembering or trying to keep the memory alive of the fact that nature will bloom again, that you will be able to eat again, that the darkness not will eventually go and the warmth will return. And that's one of the themes that I always come back to. And so it's finding materials that aren't necessarily, that you would necessarily go out and buy in a Christmas decoration shop. I don't really buy baubles and things like that because they're not really, for me, that applicable to the sort of decorating I do. But I would certainly buy fabric to be able to change things, and also cushion covers so that you can change your existing soft furnishings and things like that, which actually go to build a complete look. The other thing is also getting decorations up off the floor, plinths and things like that, so that you can easily change the sort of landscape of a room without having to fix to anything. And it's most probably building up, certainly mirrors are very important, and sort of things of scale so that you're not always just putting things on the floor. Most decorations need to be, 1 meter 50 to 2 meters high, so that at least if you're having a party, then they're still visible.
Oh, absolutely. If you had to pick one decoration or an element that every home should have for Christmas, what would it be and why?
Well, the icon for Christmas is the tree. I don't usually have a tree inside for all sorts of reasons, but I generally would, most people would see that as the key thing that you need to have. It is a sort of long conversation about whether it should be real or not, and all of those sorts of things. It's down to personal space and practicality of whether you feel that that is the key element to celebrating this part of the year. Whereas for me, it's most probably things like good sets of lights that sort out the problem of the sort of the practicality of doing Christmas decorations. So in a way, I think that one can't have one thing because it really does depend on where you're decorating from. If you had a flat that is all glass windows, then a full set of, curtains of light would be the obvious thing that you would invest in. Whereas if you've got a very relatively small, period house, then you would have a small tabletop tree that you then concentrate all your time on. So in a way, you've got to actually fit whatever it is you use most to where you're living.
If you could spend Christmas in a fictional world, where would it be?
I've most probably already just told you it. I spend Christmas in a fictional world, which is actually in my imagination, which is what I have been living on and using and living in since I was 10 years old. So it would actually be inside my head, recalling the moments that I've created for myself and the worlds I've created for myself and for other people over the years, because that's what I do. I create stories that other people can visually enjoy. So in a way, it's most probably not even fictional. For me, it's actually real. But most of the time, when I'm designing, it obviously does not exist in reality. And that's my job, is to imagine things that can then be brought to reality. So it's much like listening to, reading a book or listening to a radio play, that I create these stories in my head that I can then visualize and see. And I feel that that's the same with Christmas. I'm creating a sort of a recreation of the moment I felt the first moment of joy, which was my parents' first Christmas tree, of how the world could be transformed. And I've been very lucky to carry on doing that for the past sort of 50 odd years in all sorts of places. And my front room on Christmas Day is most probably one of the most delightful ones that I enjoy every year with my nearest and dearest.
Aw. Well, in a way as well, then, with what you do on a daily basis, it's sort of like you're almost painting that picture for other people to then walk into and then enjoy themselves and hopefully have that or experience that spark that you had with your parents' first Christmas tree then.
Yes, exactly. And that's really what I feel about the reason for making such an effort to decorate, be it your front garden or your house, or whoever it's for. That's, for me, is the gift that I give other people, is my recreation of my joy of seeing something like this. And that for me is the gift of Christmas. It's giving other people the gift of some form of happiness at this time of year when it's very dark and very depressing, and we all need cheering up.
Oh, absolutely. That, and also the festive spirit is always it's always something that gets us through this month and then into the new year as well.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for coming on to an episode of Untold Chapters with us and telling your story as well. And hopefully, this will be a wonderful year for you as well.
Brilliant.
Thank you for tuning in for today's episode. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, please follow and review.